Revolutions Per Minute is a weekly radio show from the New York City chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America, recorded live at WBAI 99.5 in Brooklyn every Tuesday at 5. RPM is about doing the work to build a democratic socialist future. Every week, hear the latest news, analysis, and organizing experience from the minds and hearts of activists fighting every day in NYC. Join the movement at socialists.nyc.
Hey, what's up, New York City? This is Amy Wilson. You're listening to Revolutions Per Minute. We are a socialist radio show and podcast from members of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America. The Democratic Socialists of America is the largest socialist organization in the United States, with 75,000 members nationwide. NYCDSA is its biggest chapter. We are run by our 5,500 plus members and organizers who are working together to build democratic socialism in all 5 boroughs. Once again, my name is Amy Wilson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the DSA of North Brooklyn. After getting slammed by 2 hurricanes just several weeks apart, residents of Southwest Louisiana have been left to take care of each other and their communities. On today's episode, we'll talk with Megan Romer of Southwest Louisiana DSA on how anybody can help from afar and how no matter where we are, we can prepare to respond to the many crises we face with mutual aid and solidarity. We'll also discuss an ongoing climate struggle right here in our own backyard, the fight to stop a new fracked gas pipeline in North Brooklyn, where communities are stepping up to stop construction by putting their bodies on the line. But first, the headlines with Simone Norman.
While Cuomo has stalled efforts to close the looming budget deficit, state lawmakers have introduced a variety of bills that would increase taxes on the ultra-wealthy. Meanwhile, CUNY is facing severe budget cuts due to revenue shortfalls incurred by COVID and a refusal from Cuomo to raise new revenue. Incoming and incumbent left-wing state legislators are pursuing rent cancellation and an eviction moratorium in an effort to prevent a homelessness crisis. New York judges are posting higher partially secured bonds in an effort to further undermine 2019 bail reforms. Since the state rolled back the 2019 bail reforms, New York City's pretrial detention population has increased by almost 16%. Cuomo threatened to pull state funding for yeshivas that were non-compliant with COVID restrictions. The New York Times connected resistance to COVID guidelines in Brooklyn's Orthodox Jewish communities to Trump. Governor Cuomo is reportedly being considered as a potential attorney general pick should Joe Biden win the presidency this fall. The City Council is poised to renew tax lien sales, a product of the Giuliani administration, for 4 more years. The program has been accused of perpetuating a cycle of apartment neglect and tenant abuse in low-income communities of color. State Senator Julia Salazar of Bushwick and incoming Assembly Member Emily Gallagher of Greenpoint have penned an op-ed opposing new fossil fuel infrastructure and advocating for public ownership of New York's energy systems. Activists spray-painted "Eat the Landlords" on the doors of the Brooklyn courthouse and locked it shut on Friday. The New Yorker released a profile of Cuomo that detailed his beef with the Working Families Party and connections to the Independent Democratic Conference. And finally, New York Focus, a new independent media outlet focusing on New York state politics, debuted last week with a piece on NYCDSA's electoral successes and the limitations of Cuomo's climate benchmarks. In election news, Ronald Lauder, a billionaire donor to a variety of right-wing causes, has poured several $1 million into a campaign to support Republican state senators in Long Island and upstate swing districts. These districts will determine whether or not Democrats can net 2 more seats in the Senate and win a veto-proof supermajority that disempowers Governor Cuomo. Council member Barry Grodenchik of Eastern Queens has announced he will not seek re-election after serving 1.5 terms on the council. State Senator Brian Benjamin of Harlem announced his candidacy for New York City Comptroller. The New York State Board of Elections is hoping to train 51,000 poll workers by Election Day, a 150% increase from 2016, but appears to be behind schedule. First Lady Chirlane McCray will not run for Brooklyn Borough President next year. And finally, the Jim Owls Liberal Democratic Club hosted the first 2021 mayoral candidate forum. The event featured 7 hopefuls via Zoom and was watched by approximately 1,200 people.
Thank you, Simone. Our headlines are brought to you by The Thorn, an incredible weekly newsletter by New York City DSA's Electoral Working Group, covering local politics and radical activism. You can subscribe at thethorn.nyc. So on today's episode of Revolutions Per Minute, we're focusing on the many crises that we're experiencing as we continue to see our climate collapse around us. And one of these struggles is actually happening right here in my own backyard. Every week on Revolutions Per Minute, I identify myself as a member of DSA of North Brooklyn, and I really do live here in North Brooklyn, where there is a struggle to stop a new fracked gas pipeline being constructed by National Grid. So to help me talk about this ongoing struggle, I have a great comrade who you better know as a host of Revolutions Per Minute, the lovely and talented Lee Zishi. Hi, Lee. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm happy to be here as, a pipeline nerd and a eco-socialist expert, I guess, rather than a host. But yeah, it's easier on this side of it, less stress. But
yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited for the Revolutions Per Minute audience to benefit from your eco-socialist expertise and learn more about this pipeline struggle, which has been making headlines these past couple days and weeks. So, Lee, how long has this pipeline struggle been going on? It may be new to many followers of New York City politics, but it's not a new thing, if I understand correctly. So talk to me a little bit about the history here.
yeah, so actually National Grid has been building this frack gas pipeline through North Brooklyn since 2017. But nobody knew about it until last year. It was almost around this time. I work for a small nonprofit called Sane Energy Project, and we've been fighting fracking and frack gas infrastructure for a very long time, but recently got involved in these proceedings. It's called a rate case. So since we have these big corporate utilities, they're monopolies, they don't have any competition, they're supposed to be regulated by the Public Service Commission. And anytime they want to build infrastructure, they pretty much need to raise our bills in order to do that. So they started raising our bills back in 2017, started building this pipeline. And in 2019, we didn't know about that then, but in 2019, Sane Energy got involved in the National Grid downstate rate case. And I saw this huge chunk of money going for this pipeline. And we're like, where is this? And there wasn't any maps at first. I hadn't discovered that National Grid even had a website about it. And I originally thought it might be in my neighborhood in Bed-Stuy, where they already have a lot of pipelines. And then we finally get this map and I'm like, oh, holy shit, this is in my coworker Kim's, literally her backyard in Bushwick. And at about that same time, that's actually when construction was starting in Bushwick on Flushing Avenue and Bushwick Avenues in that region. So it was oh, that's what that construction is. So this has been going on, at least we've been kind of organizing against it for about a year now. And it's definitely, when you talk about timeframes, this year has not been your typical year. But yeah, that's kind of, how long we've been fighting it and where we're at.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about beyond just, the construction of new fracked gas pipelines when, as I said in our intro, the climate is collapsing all around us. Talk to me about the specific objections that we're hearing from residents of these communities. Why do people believe that this pipeline should be stopped?
Yeah, so if you look at this pipeline, it's being built predominantly through Black and brown working class neighborhoods that all have a history of environmental pollution, whether that's the oil spill that's under Greenpoint. Also, communities around the BQE suffer from a lot of pollution. There's a lot of waste transfer stations in this area where trucks are idling and also creating pollution. Brownsville, where the construction has started, has some of the highest asthma rates for adults in the entire city of New York. So these are people who have faced environmental pollution for a long time. And people know that frack gas infrastructure also threatens public health. People will say gas is clean, but this gas is coming from the Marcellus Shale, which is a very highly radioactive shale formation. And it's only traveling a small distance from Pennsylvania into our city. So we're worried that radioactivity could actually build up in the pipeline. There's also always a risk of a leak or explosion. National Grid went to the community board one in Williamsburg and told people, oh, our pipelines don't explode. And 2 weeks later, some of their workers were injured while working on a pipeline and there was an explosion. We've seen huge explosions in San Bruno, California, also in a suburb in Massachusetts. So that's always a concern as well. And then there's also, the climate impacts of this. New York City is a frontline community. And as you said, we know frack gas is a climate disaster. National Grid will try to say it's clean, but this gas starts leaking at the wellhead in Pennsylvania. It leaks all along the big interstate transmission pipelines, and it's leaking right here in New York City. And what it's leaking is a very, very potent greenhouse gas, methane. And then also, the fact that our bills are going up to pay for this. I think, I've been on the streets a couple of times in the last few days and people are like, oh, what is that? And I'm like, it's a frack gas pipeline. And they're like, oh, that doesn't sound good. And then when I'm like, oh yeah, you're going to pay for it. And they're like, oh, hell no. People, even before the pandemic and, the economic fallout of that, people were really struggling to pay utility bills. And now that, we've been in this tough situation, that energy burden and that debt has only been growing. So the fact that National Grid wants to raise our rates when we really can't, financially afford it. And we know that these might be investments in stranded assets because our city and state climate goals say that we need to get off gas. So those are, the reasons that people are really concerned. And they also felt like National Grid never came to them, never let them know. I've never met one person yet on the streets or canvassing or at a public meeting at rallies who actually heard about this from National Grid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that offends me. The paying for it in our utility bills offends me. And I will say, as a resident of just like your coworker Kim, it is going right through my backyard. I'm very alarmed by the safety aspects of it, knowing how dense this neighborhood is, knowing how many schools, a hospital is right by the construction line. So it just seems unsafe to have this going through a densely populated area of Brooklyn. Beyond that as well, I think the arguments about the environmentally racist aspects of this are really poignant. And we do need to be hearing from the people who are going to be directly affected by the negative health effects of this type of construction. So to that end, who is out there protesting against the pipeline, and what are people doing in order to make their objections known? Talk to me a little bit about the tactics that you're using.
Yeah, so pretty much communities all along the pipeline route have now found out about it and started organizing. There is one coalition called the No North Brooklyn Pipeline Coalition, which St. Energy is a part of. A lot of other nonprofits from the area are involved, or at least as much as they can. During the COVID pandemic, a lot of them were doing mutual aid. So we were bottom lining some of that organizing. But when there's a rally, that kind of thing, they show up. There's also another collective called Frack Out of BK that's led by community members, Black, Indigenous, people of color, mostly based in Bushwick and Brownsville and some of East Williamsburg, that area. And, there's some different tactics, like No NBK Pipeline. We've been focusing on the regulatory space and influencing our politicians. We obviously do the other stuff as well, but, that's not really Frack Out of BK's deal. And then also, there's a group of residents in Brownsville who have they're a part of the No NBK Pipeline Coalition, but they're also a little bit, autonomous, like on their own, as local, mostly Black people living in that community. So these three kind of coalitions, and this has all been developing very, very quickly in the last year, like I said, in the middle of a pandemic and economic crisis. But we've been coming together and, St. Energy and some of the people of the No NBK Pipeline Coalition have tried the regulatory space. We've actually intervened in this rate case proceeding, we're something called a party. It is not a party, it is boring and it is depressing. And a lot of it happens in confidential settlement negotiations. And I won't get too deep into the, utility regulatory thing right now, but everybody should be offended that this huge energy decision that will impact our communities and our bills is being decided in closed door confidential settlement negotiations. And I can't say like where that's at, but I will say that one, the regulatory kind of thing has dragged on so long that they're almost done. They're almost done with phase 1 through 4 of the pipeline, and they can get gas flowing through that. And it's so clear that, Governor Cuomo is not going to step up in time, and Mayor de Blasio, who could pull these permits tomorrow if he wanted to, is not going to step up in time. We've had some big rallies. We've had thousands and thousands of public comments and petition signatures against this. All the elected officials in the area have come out against it. Even Congresswoman Nydia Velasquez came out against it at the pipeline site yesterday. But all that stuff, we're doing all the right thing. We're showing the science. We're showing the community opposition. It's still moving forward. So what happened last week is 2 days in a row, 8 brave individuals actually locked down to either the pipeline itself or other parts of the construction site and halted construction. Those days, after these people were taken out and arrested, the company cleaned up the site a little bit, but pretty much for 5 days in a row, from Thursday of last week, where Thursday was the first direct action, Friday there was more direct action. Then on the weekend, I think they were afraid to come out and do work. And then on Monday, we had this whole crew of elected officials saying, Scott Stringer literally said, hell no, where are you, Mayor de Blasio? So there was 5 days in a row where they weren't doing construction. And that's where we're at. If you're using direct action, I think correctly, and civil disobedience, as a strategy, you do it when you don't have any other choice left. Like, trust me, nobody wants to chain themselves to these pipelines. And especially on Friday, it was raining and cold and muddy, and the workers were so aggressive and they were swearing at us and kind of, pushing people. So this was, literally, we didn't have any other choice. And, one of the people that locked down on Friday is this amazing guy named Gabe, who lives in Brownsville and has, he, in the past has gotten hundreds of people in his neighborhood of Brownsville to put solar on their roofs, so he knows what the alternative can be. One of the other guys that locked down, Benny, he's been involved in this rate case. And like I said, I can't talk about this confidential settlement, but I think the frustration of seeing how our regulators are failing us, got him to the point where he could say, yeah, I'm willing to put my body on the line. This woman, Patti, who's from fracked BK, her daughter's school is, along the pipeline route. There's community gardens that she works in along the pipeline route. And so that's why they were willing, to put their bodies on the line and shut it down.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I was able to be there on the Friday action when indeed it was I need people to understand just how rainy it was on Friday. It was extremely rainy, and that made the action itself all the more poignant because it really underscored the seriousness of the people who are participating in it, as you outlined there. And at that action, I can also vouch for the fact that the workers are incredibly aggressive. As on that day, that's the only thing I can directly speak to, but I did see that with my own eyes. And one of the things I heard the National Grid foreman or worksite supervisor shouting at the people who were locking down to the pipeline was saying, don't you use energy? Don't you understand that this is to give you energy? So I want to give you a chance, Lee, to respond to that argument now.
Yeah, and it was funny because he kind of directed that at me at one point. And I was like, because he said oh, don't you use gas to cook? And I'm like, actually, I've met so many people harmed by fracking that I couldn't really use my gas stove anymore. So I use a plug-in. And he's like, go back to Pennsylvania. But one, individual solutions like that aren't the thing. It's not all up to us as individuals to stop using gas. We need to change this system. But the fact is, National Grid originally said that this pipeline was to add a new lane of another traffic lane, but they also originally proposed this pipeline to, have more capacity and add capacity to their system. They're denying it now, but there's this whole record built. And the thing is, there's a lot of reasons to question National Grid. They've lied about capacity before. But if there is any constraint, really. We can meet those needs by investing in renewable energy instead. It's clear communities don't want more frack gas for the health impacts, for the climate impacts. So that $185 million that National Grid is spending right now, and they're going to try to, raise our rates to then recoup that funds, plus, a little extra for their shareholders, that could be going to putting geothermal or air source heat pumps in Jamaica, Queens. That's their new line is, oh, there's pressure issues in Jamaica, Queens. And we also know that a lot of times these areas where there's like constraints, oh, look, there's also big luxury developments too. So I think a bigger part of this is, okay, moving forward, how do we sustainably develop energy that benefits our communities? And that's all technologically possible. Our bills have been subsidizing conversions from oil to gas since Bloomberg, who also profited off the fossil fuel industry. But the technological solutions exist. Right now, it's really just political will. So we can absolutely heat our homes, we can cook our food, and we can do it in a way that isn't, fracking somebody in Pennsylvania. That's why I do a lot of this work, because I know people that, can't drink their water. I worry about my family and just the air pollution in that region now. So we can do all this without having to sacrifice somebody. The only reason the current system is this way is because somebody is profiting off of that. They're not paying the cost of the pollution, they're just profiting. So if we change our energy system, we can absolutely take care of everyone's needs. We're not going to leave anybody out in the cold.
It's incredibly inspiring to not only hear you speak about these issues, but also to have seen and participated in one of these actions myself, especially seeing people jumping into a muddy construction site on a rainy day as people are shouting at them to lock themselves to a pipeline. It's an incredibly courageous act, and it speaks to the importance of listening to those people and listening to those communities and really getting behind that struggle. But as much as, you and your coalition are putting into this struggle, National Grid is clearly also pushing back. I saw a big old fence go up around the construction site that's around the corner from my home. And I've heard that National Grid wants to have gas flowing through that pipeline this month. So where does this fight go from here? What happens in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out how we can have, a consistent presence and rally site at the pipeline construction every day. And we're working on getting some Google Forms and things to get the infrastructure ready for that, because some of our small crew has been a little worn out after a bunch of days of actions in a row. And you're right, yeah, National Grid put up this gigantic fence around a lot of the site today, where actions have taken place, where we've actually been able to, get in there and halt construction. So, if we're not able to continue to halt construction and National Grid does finish the pipeline, they are very close to finishing phases 1 through 4, like this site where we've been blockading, where it turns to the left is where it connects to their old system. And they're just like a block away from that. And where it turns to the right is where it heads towards Greenpoint. And they have this big gas depot that they're trying to expand there. So this is this critical juncture. But if we aren't able to stop it, that doesn't necessarily mean that our bills get to automatically go up to pay for this. And I think that's a really important kind of ground for us to fight for. We actually have a lot of power here. It's literally our money that we're sending every month to National Grid. So, I don't know about anybody else, but I think I'm going to have a really hard time, sending more money every month for National Grid to pay for this thing. So that's something we should still pressure Governor Cuomo to do, to reject this rate hike, not only for this pipeline, but any frack gas infrastructure National Grid is building. I think we can still call on the mayor, to try to pull the permits if we can't get in there to shut it down, and hope that he does. But if not, we can always call for gas to be turned off as well. And I would also really encourage people to check out New York City DSA Eco-Socialist as part of a statewide campaign for public power. And actually there is this week, there's statewide actions happening around public power. So, whether this pipeline gets built or not, I think National Grid has shown that they have no right to be in control of our energy distribution system. And I don't think we can meet our climate goals as long as we have corporate profit being part of the mix. So definitely get people should check out the Campaign for Public Power. There will actually be a rally outside National Grid's headquarters in downtown Brooklyn this Thursday, 9:30 a.m. National Grid is building these things, in people's neighborhoods without their consent. So we're bringing our message of public power, right to their doorstep on Thursday. Definitely follow No NBK Pipeline. If people want to get involved, we're going to keep fighting until the gas stops flowing and we have a more just energy system.
Right on. So you're listening to Revolutions Per Minute. I'm Amy Wilson. Thank you so much, Lee Zishi, for speaking with me about the No North Brooklyn Pipeline effort. So wonderful to hear you in your role as an organizer and educator, in addition to the wonderful work that you do here on our show. So if you are a regular listener of Revolutions Per Minute, you certainly recall Phil from Southwest Louisiana, who spoke with us at the end of September about their mutual aid efforts in the face of a terrible hurricane that their community was hit with around that time. They've since been slammed with another hurricane, but these comrades have not given up the fight to protect their communities from the devastating effects of climate collapse. So for more from them, we caught up with Megan from DSA of Southwest Louisiana on that ongoing situation and what we all can do to help no matter where we are in the world.
I am Lee Zishi. I use she, her pronouns. And today I am joined by Megan Romer from the Southwest Louisiana DSA chapter. Welcome to RPM.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
We're going to talk soon about, how your area has been hit by these massive hurricanes, one right after the other, and your mutual aid response. Before we dig into that, though, I'd just like our guests to get to know you a little bit better. We really like to ask people, too, how they got into this work.
Yes. So I'm Megan, she, her. I'm based in Lafayette, Louisiana, but I'm actually from Ithaca, New York, which is an area with the central New York Finger Lakes are an area with a really long history of activism, everything from, Seneca Falls to more recent fracking activism. So I kind of grew up, I'm a townie more so than like a cool college related activist. My family's like old line from there. But still you sort of grow up immersed in that kind of area and culture. And that has informed a lot of just kind of my world. I mean, being from Ithaca, like it's almost even a running joke, like people from Ithaca, we are the way that we are. But I live down here now and love lots about it. And one of the things that I find really inspiring is the labor history here, which has been like everywhere erased. But there is great activism and labor history dating back to, the slavery era and various uprisings and organizing trends, and even there were like some socialist communes down here and stuff. It's fun. It's a fun place to organize. But yeah, so we've had a couple hurricanes lately, and that has been the focus of our efforts for sure.
Yeah, so we had Phil on a couple weeks ago to talk about what the situation was like on the ground, after Hurricane Laura, this very strong storm, ripped through your area. And then just, I guess it was a couple days ago, like my sense of time during these times is so warped. But, just a few days ago, got hit by this other storm, Delta. Can you start just kind of what is the situation like right now on the ground in your area?
Yeah, so Delta, it's wild. We're in only the second hurricane season in history where we have had to go into the Greek letters. Usually, I think they only name like 22 of the story. Like they don't use a few of the letters. So it's like, it's not quite A through Z. It's like A through W or something, and with no X. But yeah, we got through them all, and now we're actually still in hurricane season. We have another month. So I don't want to say we're done, but yeah, Delta, Laura came through, it blasted through Lake Charles and really caused a huge amount of devastation. It was a very strong hurricane, and it blew like straight over a heavily populated area. So yeah, just the sort of typical hurricane damage. There was a predicted really high storm surge, but that didn't come as strongly inland as it had been anticipated, but the wind was worse than had been anticipated. So trees were down, roofs were off, pretty much everywhere. So the city basically was a sea of blue tarp roofs and piles of debris because it takes a really long time to clear storm debris. And then Delta blew through a month and 5 weeks later, maybe, because again, time is like this large blob in which things happen, but it was really soon. So Lake Charles was already incredibly vulnerable. The storm drains can't drain if there's debris everywhere. If your roof is a blue tarp, only holds up in like a very minor rainstorm. Anything more than that, and you're in trouble. Delta hit, I think, 15 miles from where Laura made landfall. It was at a slightly different angle, so it angled kind of away from Lake Charles. But weirdly enough, usually the east side of a hurricane is, we call it the dirty side. But strangely enough, in this hurricane, the west side actually was wetter and windier. So Lake Charles, if there was a blue tarp, it's blown off. If there was a tree left, which there weren't many, they were harmed. And then there was a lot of flooding because the storm drains clogged. But then also a big part of, so just to give a quick geography lesson, if you look across Louisiana, it's like shaped like a boot, right? And then the kind of bottom of the L, the sole, it's kind of equidistant. New Orleans on one side on the east, then Baton Rouge about an hour west, then Lafayette about an hour west of that, and then Lake Charles about an hour west of that. So it's like kind of evenly spaced, these four cities. So this one blew up right between Lafayette and Lake Charles. So Lafayette was on, theoretically, the dirty side. It was not as dirty as it could have been, but we did have massive amounts of tree damage and roof damage. We didn't really flood, which is good. But yeah, the wind and, a lot of times you lose your roof because the tree blows into your house. So you have both the roof trying to blow off in the wind and the trees falling onto your roof. So yeah, I don't want to say it's universal, but it's, there's a very small tree that's on my house right now. Let's see, like out of 10 houses on my street, I think there are 4 large trees, which if it were Lake Charles, it would be all 10 houses would have large trees down. It's very, very widespread, this damage. So yeah, and it's already an economically depressed area that has been suffering. We're one of the most food insecure areas in the country. So like if you live in a wealthier area and are seeing food insecurity for the first time, okay, well, imagine what COVID did when everybody's already super vulnerable. So yeah, we're kind of, and the COVID cases are ticking back up, and there are no shelters to put people in because you can't put people in congregate spaces. And we already housed all of our houseless population in the hotels. And it just kind of goes on and on and on, like tragedy on top of tragedy on top of tragedy. And none of it had to be this way. We could have a resilient response to disaster, but we don't. So.
Yeah, I think I'd maybe like to talk about some of that like long-term picture in a second. But as far as like your, immediate response, we talked to Phil about the mutual aid work you were already doing. And I've been seeing, you've been kind of working with some more like national groups like Mutual Aid Disaster Relief. I found out about what was going on through, the New York City DSA Eco-Socialist Twitter, retweeted you. So could you talk a little bit about what your local organizing looks like right now in these, few days right after the storm once again, and how you've been working with some of these more, national kind of coalitions or collectives of mutual aid and disaster response?
Sure. So our chapter is actually split between Lafayette and Lake Charles, both of which are fairly small cities and heavily Republican cities. So we're more of we're definitely a very, very small minority of socialists here. But so there aren't a lot of us. And Laura really kind of took out our Lake Charles folks. Everybody had to evacuate. And the people who have come back have had varying degrees of ability to, Phil's apartment complex was completely destroyed and he had to find somewhere else to be. So our Lake Charles folks have been amazing, and it's amazing how much they're able to do, but they're not at full capacity, obviously, because they have their own stuff to deal with. So the fact that this storm came in then and hit Lafayette meant that our initial response, last time our initial response could be, we didn't get hit by a storm. So our initial response was, we can jump in and help our neighbors. This time we also got hit by a storm. So my first thing I did was I had to go get trees out of my yard and make sure my roof was okay, which it's maybe not. And so it's a little bit of a okay, you got to kind of put on your own oxygen mask first. But also, a bunch of my comrades showed up to help clear branches out of my yard, and somebody had a chainsaw, and we, that kind of thing. So it's nice to have a community that, especially for me, I'm not from here. I don't have an uncle down the street like a lot of people do. But then as soon as we were done with ourselves, then it was, get to work. And we really kind of work mutual aid style, just kind of hey, neighbor, your roof's off. Can we just go help you out? But Mutual Aid Disaster Relief is a really cool organization that actually came out of New Orleans originally, out of the Common Ground relief work post-Katrina. Because after the federal flood, of course, there was very little help. So people really kind of, there were two things happening. The disaster capitalists were flocking in, but there was also this really great community organizing happening. And Common Ground Relief was one of the organizations, and eventually sort of ballooned into various other things. And Mutual Aid Disaster Relief is one of them. And they do direct aid post-disaster in a very intentionally the way, the government comes in and tells you what to do. If they show up at all. The Red Cross absolutely comes in and tells you what to do. Mutual Aid Disaster Relief comes in and asks you what you need, and really has that goal of kind of horizontal, really with the heavy on the mutual aid ethos. So it is not accidental that it is in their name. So we learned a lot from them, working with them through Laura, and tried to kind of, now that with the Delta Relief, we're trying to kind of replicate a little bit of what they did ourselves, which is the goal, right? To make new organizers sustainable in their own. So they're still on the ground, but they're mostly concentrated in Lake Charles, and we're mostly concentrating in Lafayette, doing what we can. We've also, we've partnered with local agencies in our local. There's pretty comprehensive disaster relief local agencies on the Gulf Coast, because disasters happen a lot, or more than they might elsewhere. So we've partnered with some organizations who are doing that, and will probably continue to do so. We've also gotten a lot of support from DSA comrades from chapters around the country, including people coming in. New Orleans, of course, is right there, and we've had crews coming in fairly regularly. There were a lot right after the storm, when it was sort of immediate, get tarps on roofs, and then steadily, and then again, they're coming back. But also just all sorts of material and financial and just support from other chapters. But East Bay DSA makes hand sanitizer, and they sent several cases of hand sanitizer, which was awesome, bulk hand sanitizer, which we can then refill everybody's bottles with, put them on our work trucks and stuff, all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, and on the Mutual Aid Disaster Relief site, they had this quote that I thought was really interesting, or it might have been a link to a report, but it's the future is now overlapping constant disaster, and mutual aid is survival strategy. I mean, I'm guessing that must really resonate in an area where, one, you were just devastated by the coronavirus. You kind of, briefly touched on just how this area has been, run down and extracted and put in such a vulnerable place to start with. And then you just get slammed by two, strong hurricanes, fueled by climate change in an area that's also, degrading the land by, extracting oil and gas and petrochemicals and all those kind of things, contributing to climate change.
Totally.
So, just kind of looking forward, how much of your organizing is kind of just going to be preparing for these kind of things? And also, how are you also using that as opportunities to build that other future? So you're not always just responding and fighting off the disaster capitalists.
Yeah, for sure. It's because I'm not from here and have a lot of connections where I've, people visit and they'll say it's so backwards here. Or, sometimes even not condescendingly, just it's, and it's all right, look, Louisiana is not your past. Louisiana is your future. This is what the future looks like. Like, you can think we're stuck in 1960. And in some cultural ways, absolutely, it is a problem. There is some thinking that needs some rethinking. And for sure, we have a lot of work to do on civil rights and just equity and decolonization and all of that stuff. But yeah, so does everybody. But as far as the disaster thing, just the repeats and repeats. And, you can start like listing things off. Like the Lake Charles area has one of the highest cancer rates in the country. Southeast Louisiana, there's a parish, St. James Parish, that has the highest cancer rate in the country because they make neoprene there, and the fumes from the neoprene, so that you can have your neoprene lunchbox or neoprene laptop case or diving suit, are killing people, mostly poor Black people, who are living, 50 feet from where their ancestors were held in bondage. So yeah, we're looking at this like violent history clashing with this brutal reality of climate change. So yeah, it's a lot. It's overwhelming. It's like emotionally overwhelming. You kind of look and you're like, what can be done? But also there's huge opportunity for organizing, and people do get it. A lot of people get it. Not everybody gets it, but a lot of people do. There are definitely some really inspiring organizing or groups organizing right now. Rise St. James is one that I think should be a model for everybody. It's a local group of, I have not personally met a lot of Rise St. James people, but every picture I see, it's like a bunch of moms. It's like these, middle-aged Black women who have organized their community against petrochemical manufacturing and have had some serious victories. Like there were some big plants that were going to open and they didn't get opened, which I just think is so cool. So we have that potential for sure. How we confront it poly-ed wise, like political education wise, is really important and going to be key. Right now, a lot of it is like, okay, let's just get the trees off the roofs and lawns right now, because it's hard to confront it. I mean, that's part of the trick, right? That's part of the disaster capitalist trick, that they know everybody's exhausted by the enormity of the task ahead, and so that's how they get you. But yeah, we have a lot of conversations. Okay, so like when we're, people have sent us money via GoFundMe. Okay, how do we spend that money in ways that, first of all, immediately and directly impact the community, but also build community, which is daunting, but also kind of cool. Like it gives you some cool opportunities. So it gives you some spaces to let your organizer imagination run wild a little bit. So we do have a few plans and a few things in the works. There's a small rural community that got hit really hard and no help seems to have shown up. But we met this woman there who is, like sets off all your alarm bells for an organic leader, right? Like you're like, oh yeah, this lady, she knows everybody. Everybody likes her, everybody respects her. Like you keep hearing her name in different, and then she like jumped right in with us and was like, yeah, okay, let's do this. So she has been working on opening a community center, and what we are going to be able to do is, we have approval for this. We're still working out logistics. So if it somehow doesn't happen, nobody be sad, because there are other opportunities like it. But we're going to pay rent on this. It's an old like feed store mercantile. We're going to pay rent on it for 4 months for her and stock it as a free store while she uses it to build out her community center, which is going to include things like providing internet to the local kids who can't be in school for whatever reason, but don't have internet at home because rural internet's a disaster. And COVID has made school a whole thing with, distance learning and hybrid and whatnot. So that is a way that we can both provide immediate needs to the community who like need things like tarps or food, because, we like my house, I live like in the center of Lafayette in a fairly boring middle-class neighborhood, and we lost power for 48 hours. Folks who are in less comfortable positions either still don't have power or lost it for a really long time. When you lose power for that long, all your food's spoiled. Unless you have an extensive network of coolers and, and ice, and you're ready, and you've got the cool ice packs and whatever. But yeah, so folks just need food because actually food is expensive. Hygiene products, stuff like that. A lot of people's cars were damaged by the storm, so they can't drive. You know, if you live in some place like this small town, the closest place to get groceries is the Walmart 20 miles away. If you don't have a car anymore, tough luck. So that kind of thing. So that's one way that we're looking at kind of spending the money in a way that builds community, is sustainable, but also meets people's needs immediately. I think we're going to do a couple pop-up free stores in Lafayette. We were thinking we're going to do maybe a pop-up produce market, you know, buy up a bunch of it and do a produce giveaway probably this week because, again, of everybody losing all the food in their fridge. So the thing that goes is your tomatoes and lettuce.
Lived in South Florida for a while, so I went through Hurricane Wilma.
Yeah.
Actually, Hurricane Katrina hit us. It wasn't bad when it hit
Right,
Florida,
right.
but a basketball hoop fell on my car, and then we didn't have power for 9 days. Yeah, so it was that same thing. Like first we just cooked up everything on the grill, and then
right.
But this was also, you know, it's like a more affluent suburb, so of course they had huge ice stations.
Right.
You know, there was resources,
Right.
even though these are probably the people who needed them the least. You know, their government, the local government was there.
Totally.
But yeah, I guess, is there anything else you'd like to add? And how can people, you know, follow the work that y'all are doing in Southwest Louisiana, you know, in this immediate moment where you need help and moving forward as you're building socialism in this very difficult turf to be organized?
Yeah. Hostile territory for sure. So yeah, you can definitely follow us we're on all the socials, DSA SWLA on Twitter, and then just search DSA SWLA on Facebook and Instagram, and they'll pop up. And yeah, we actually have a GoFundMe running right now. It's kind of the easiest because we're so small. It's actually difficult for us to both manage large projects and also all of the books. So GoFundMe actually is not everybody's favorite, but it does make the easiest accounting. Like they send you really nice forms, so it makes it much easier for us. So if you don't mind donating that way, if you'd like to, that would be great. We will use your money, like I said, as quickly as we can, as directly as we can, but also in ways that hopefully continue to build community and sustainable, resilient structures here. We also, we have like an Amazon wish list, which is terrible, but it is pretty convenient. So like if your mom's like, hey, can I send something? Be like, yeah, mom, I know you have Amazon Prime, send it through this list. You can find that linked at our Twitter also. Yeah, I'm really into digital organizing and just like the possibilities of remote organizing. So I'm kind of trying to pilot a little project that kind of puts people to work who are, I just think there's like a lot of opportunity for folks who are not in the disaster zone to do certain online things or on the phone things. And so we're building out there's a little working Slack. So if you're interested in digital organizing, our Twitter has a link to that also. But things like a person who's not there can say like, all right, let me call all the gas stations in this parish or county and see who has gas, or call all the pharmacies and see who's open yet. Or we have somebody who's compiling hot meals because the sort of folks need a hot meal and lots of people are offering a hot meal, but it's like this total mess of who's offering what. And so the only way you get the info is like, if you're in a Facebook group and you see the one thing. So we've got somebody who's actively like scanning Facebook every day, just compiling like what churches, where's the Salvation Army's truck, where's World Central Kitchen's truck, to make a list. So that kind of thing is something that can be done remotely. And if a bunch of that stuff gets done by digital volunteers from elsewhere, that really frees up the people on the ground to like drag tree trunks. Not that I actually want to be dragging tree trunks. I'm not allowed to have a chainsaw, so it's against all the rules. But for sure. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for that, and so we're kind of playing with that a little bit, and I'm having some fun. Yeah, no, it is actually fun. Talking with people from elsewhere in the country, and yeah, I think there's a lot of long-term potential there, and that's a good way for DSA folks and other organizers from around the country to support each other in a disaster, or whether it's a natural disaster or some sort of economic disaster or whatever, any number of the things that happen these days that people need support for. Because so much, I mean, if we have learned nothing during COVID, it's that, we can actually do a ton of stuff not on the ground now. So how do we lift that burden off people who are on the ground and let them do what they're doing?
Yeah. And I think the other thing we learned is, no one else is going to show up for us if our community isn't
That's
there. The
it.
one, like Bed-Stuy Mutual Aid in my community, is doing the free fridges, all that kind of stuff. So thank you so much for making the time to be on RPM today, and also, sharing these lessons that you're learning, on the ground as you're piloting them in the middle of a disaster zone, so that we can all learn from that. Because, no matter where you are, whether you're going to get hit by climate change or something like the pandemic, this is such useful knowledge for all of our communities. So really appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, we're all we've got. So make it happen.
Yeah, well, keep us posted. Keep
Thank
RPM
you.
in mind, and your comrades in New York are here for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Megan. Thank you, Lee, for doing that interview with her on the same show where you were also being interviewed. This is a lady who can do it all. And Lee, do you have any final thoughts on what we've discussed on today's show about climate collapse, mutual aid, the interconnectedness of all of these struggles? Anything that you'd like to leave our listening audience with today?
Yeah, I guess as somebody who's been in the environmental movement now for almost 7 or 8 years, I've seen the silos. And I do think that this, one, as these crises all kind of intensify, I do like that. I feel like those silos are collapsing a little bit. And I think, if we're going to succeed in any of these fights, we're going to have to keep doing organizing in that way. And I'm so grateful for, all the work people have done with mutual aid, because I've, learned so much. Like, we've had this huge influx of people who are interested in joining our campaign. And I'm like, oh, well, this is how people with mutual aid organize that. So I really see those silos collapsing. And just recognizing that, say stopping this pipeline here, might help the next storm not be as bad in Southwest Louisiana. We are all so connected, and by taking back our energy, we're taking back power on, so many different levels.
Thank you. And thanks for listening to Revolutions Per Minute. We'll be back next week with more from the struggle for a better world.